Gene is here. Hi, Gene.
Okay, recording.
Whoa, you did that.
Morning, guys.
Hello.
And gals.
So either we can talk about glossary in the Kanban or continue on the presentations and the models. What do you think?
Well, we stopped in the middle of Marc-Antoine's presentation, didn't we?
I did end up finishing. I don't know if you had a chance to see the recording.
Oh, no, I didn't see it. Bummer.
It's okay. I did, by the way, for all your information, rework the beginning of the presentation. I wanted to rework more of it. I'm not done, but I did incorporate some of the comments about presentation, and I did make some things clearer, which made it into the Kanban. So I am in favor of going to the Kanban.
Yeah, it's probably most efficient. And then either we can redo your presentation or Tim can check out the video. And I'm sure it'll overlap anyways. So, yep. I guess I could pull up the Trello on my computer and share it. Who wants to choose a subtopic?
Well, we're working on aligning claim right now. Oh, Stephen is there. Great. So yeah, I think we're working on aligning the definition of claim. And what I'm saying, and forget the names up to a point, but there's three concepts, and I think it won't be too hard to agree on the concept, even if it may be hard to agree on the name of the concept. It's what I call the posit, which is the claim with zero truth value. There's the claim with one truth value, saying this is true. Like the Earth is maybe flat as the posit, if you will. The Earth is flat is the claim with one truth value. The Earth is not flat is the claim with one truth value. And there's what I call the claim family, which you all call the claim, which is taking the Earth is flat and the Earth is not flat, and the Earth is the Earth flat, the question form, as a unit.
That's not the current glossary definition. Just to clarify that, if you open my definition, that's not what claim is.
Okay.
One form.
Let's go. Oh.
One ID you agree or disagree with. It's not saying that it represents both. It even says in the examples, the Earth is flat and the Earth is not flat, like two separate claims, I think.
A claim can also be phrased as a question.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the claim
That's what I
is a
disagree
question.
with.
Doesn't mean the claim is a question. It says you can.
No, but here the Earth is flat and the Earth is not flat is false. Okay, cool. But is the question okay? Question, clarification. When you say the question phrase is the Earth is not flat, is the question phrase part of the claim or is it a separate thing?
I would call it a separate thing.
Okay, fair.
So I saw Felix's suggestion where we removed the question thing, so maybe there's some confusion to that, but it's more part of the definition in the sense that if you phrase a claim as a question, you can respond yes or no to it. That's more part of the definition of what a claim is than anything else. If you cannot respond yes or no to it, I wouldn't call it a claim. If phrased as a question form.
I'm aligned with that, actually.
I think that there should be a distinction between questions and claims. All claims can be turned into questions.
That's what I mean with that formulation exactly. I also agree there should be a distinction, but that's what so maybe that can be rewritten, but that's the intent.
Okay, because the question phrase, is the Earth not flat? I get that it implies a specific interpretation, like it implies yes. However, to me, that would be like a rhetorical device and not necessarily, I mean, in the CDL, in the land of CD, like rhetorical devices and things like that are okay. But for SL, it's a matter of inquiring into truth. So that's just a leading rhetorical device that should either be translated into a question or a definitive claim.
Yep, fully agree. That's why one of the examples is not a claim and there's a question there. So So if you look at the examples there, well, actually that's a bad example because it's not a claim phrase, it's a question. So maybe we should add that.
Yeah, mine is in the examples section. It's, what was it? The third one down, is the earth not flat? So that supposedly matches the definition, but for me, like that rhetorical device, although I get how it may be considered a claim question, it just doesn't fit with the SL model.
No, but it says of which the question phrase is. It doesn't say, okay, but I see the problem. But I think we're aligned. It's a matter of formulating it properly.
Okay, I think we are better aligned than I thought. I think my difference was more with Tim, and Stephen's definition is not Tim's. Because am I right that Tim included the negation and question form in the same modeling?
In the entity model, yeah, but now we're talking.
Okay.
That's why we need to have some glossary things first before we can talk entity modeling, in my opinion. And then we can still see whether or not we want to. Yeah.
The point about the rhetorical device, Jamie, is interesting because is the earth not flat? Or it's both a rhetorical device and a form of the same question. Is the earth flat? Is the earth not flat? They're both the same question. They have different rhetorical value, but it's the same question. So yeah, as a modeling device, I'm saying question is a kind of claim, and I'm stretching the definition of claim, but that's a modeling device. Because I'm stretching I'm saying truth value can go, and that's a separate conversation up to a point, but truth value can go beyond true or false. And I'm seeing the interrogative form is a kind of truth value for me.
If that is the case, we might, rather than starting with claim, have to start with a truth value, and a similar impression with Felix's definition.
But I'm kind of liking, we're kind of aligning on claim at this point. I'm stretching, and I'm explicit that including questions and claims is a stretch, and it's a modeling stretch. So maybe we should have a proper definition of a question.
Again, for me, it's there as part of the test. For me, it's only there as part of a test how you can verify whether or not something is a claim. Yeah. You cannot formulate it as a question that you can respond yes or no to. It's not a claim. It's part of the definition. So if you omit that part, you have less definition, basically.
Right. So maybe the definition of claim has to change. Maybe it has to be some sort of assertion of truth, right? Because an assertion of truth is something that you can disagree with or agree with inherently. You don't need to explicitly state that it is something that is agreed with or disagreed with. So some assertion of truth implies the agreement, disagreement, but not making it necessarily a part of the definition would exclude the question, because an assertion of truth is not the question, even if the question is hypothetical.
Yes, I can agree
with that. Then we're back to the mathematical statement, which I like. Yep.
Is truth is a bit of a triggering word for lots of people. Can we say assertion of fact, or is that not as useful?
I would say fact is more triggering. Truth, as long as we associate ourselves with truth as being something that we don't necessarily determine that we can find, I think is a fine ideal to orient towards. Well, we're not saying that it is true, but
right. But you said as long as we can say that it's something that we can't find, and that's not encapsulated in the word truth. I just thought truth was more triggering. In my experience, truth is more triggering than fact. But
is the rest of the phrase even necessary? It's an assertion.
Yeah,
like, it's an assertion of whatever. It doesn't matter. It's an assertion, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's a little short.
I just want to be sure I understand what you mean by the distinction, and I think we're aligned, but I'm just checking. When you say there's a distinction between assertion of truth and what do you call the other one? Not agreement, disagreement, but one's personal position towards the assertion of truth. Can you develop that, Jamie?
Well, so in the Society Library definition of truth, we say it's the smallest assertion of truth, and it can be a fact or opinion. So it can be someone's subjective interpretation of what they assert of as being true, or it could be more of a statement of fact. So
I guess when you put the word assertion of at the beginning, that qualifies it enough that it probably doesn't matter.
Right.
I would withdraw.
I was distinguishing, by the way, if you open my truth value I was making a slightly different distinction, but I think it's related, and I want to know if you
Is
feel
your,
it's distinct. Truth value map.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure what. Yeah, Marc-Antoine Parent. I see.
Yes,
I
sorry.
didn't.
Yeah, I often use my initials given my
choose-
I
name
dragged
length.
it to alignment because we're basically talking about truth now. And there's already true, false, true value, etc.
Yeah,
Truth value map for this one.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, I use my initials a lot. Confidence is not part. The last that does not match definition could have been a note, but like if I'm saying I'm 50% certain that something is true 100% of the time, and it's not the same as I'm 100% that something is true 50% of the time. So for me, the true 50% of the time, true 100% of the time, that's the truth value. Whereas I'm 50% certain, that's the confidence. And for me, that's not part of the truth value. And that's I don't know if we want to model confidence. That's a separate question, but I wanted to make that distinction between confidence and probabilistic truth value, which are totally different things. Yeah, the only the latter part could be a truth value. Because I'm
and when we say truth
probabilities and
value, we're always talking in scales, or Stephen, or some. Is anyone saying absolutely true and absolutely false is what they mean? Does anyone?
No,
there
I'm
was
more
someone.
like
No.
in something like it could be true or it could be false, but even though if we don't know, it still belongs to that definition, I think.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what I
not the
meant.
point, right? The point is it's linked to the definition of a claim. Being if you make that claim, you're saying that claim is, and that's what we're trying to define, true or false. If you say the world is definitely not round, then you might be very convinced, but that thing as a claim can be true or false, and that's the thing we're trying to define.
But
You can
just-
say I'm
yeah.
90%. There's a 90% chance that the world is round. Yes
Well-
or no?
Well, so it sounds like that you're using Boolean rather than, in some part of your phrase, you're asserting there's a Boolean relationship in that.
I'm saying there's a very strong relationship between a claim and why we need a definition of this thing, true value. I wouldn't start right now at this point to have confidence in all these other definitions. We don't need them at this point to describe what a claim is.
Well, yeah, it's just if but when you say true or false, to me that's different than a truth value.
Yes, and I'm saying that for a claim we don't need like confidence yet, if you will.
No, but I don't like it being called true or false, because for me that's specifying a Boolean decision and excluding a truth range, right? And so I'm just concerned about using that terminology.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
we can choose whatever term for it, but do you
That's
get
why
the general point? That's basically the inherent attribute of a claim.
it is
It's
interesting.
an assertion, yeah.
Can we distinguish between truth and truth value? Like truth value may actually be relevant to the specific models for how to determine confidence in truth or whatever. When truth can be a concept that's not necessarily encapsulated by, Boolean or different forms of logic and things like that. It's more of a concept than something that's actually truly measurable. Can we agree on that?
I'm not sure what you mean, so I'm not sure. I think so, but you put confidence in truth value in the way you described it, which is what I was trying to explicitly exclude from truth value. I said there's the confidence, there's a probability, which is, I said Bayesian, but actually I'm making it a kind of frequentist thing. And maybe we can flatten it to Boolean, right? We can say, it's definitely true that this happens 50% of the time. So we're making the 50% part of the claim rather than the truth value, which is also valid. It's not the route I'm proposing to go, but I'm totally willing to budge on that. But there's agreement with the world. That's reality truth. There's kind of the frequentist aspects of truth value and other truth valuations like modal logic. And there's the confidence in those.
But honestly, I think all of this is missing the point. When a person makes a claim,
Yes.
the point is that usually, and that's why I distinguish between statement and claim, but typically when a person makes a claim, they're saying this claim is true. And
Yes.
that's the semantics we're talking about here. All what you're saying might be true as well, but that's not the thing we're trying to define right now.
No. Okay. Let's get into that, because I disagree with that statement. Where I do agree is.
But can you give counterexample? Concrete
Yes, absolutely.
counterexamples?
If I'm saying I'm 80% confident that this is true, it doesn't
Then the
match.
claim, no, the
Yeah.
claim is there is an 80% chance that this is true. That is a claim as a whole. That is the claim.
Yes, I agree with that.
No, and I'm saying there's a distinction there. I could say I'm 80% confident that this is true 10% of the time. This is totally different. But I see your point that even the confidence, there is an implicit claim that I'm giving my confidence assessment truthfully.
Right.
Or precisely enough, or whatever, right?
I mean, first of all, your designation of I'm this and that, right? Who's the I? If we're going to disambiguate, we're going to put a claim in the system that Marc-Antoine says that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Confidence is a personal thing, yes.
Yeah.
Whereas the
it's
truth
going to be
value
a
is
pretty
not a personal thing.
Yeah, that's going to be a pretty boring debate there, right? And not very useful, because if you're talking about, what in the end comes down to scoring something, that's a separate dimension than putting in claims. I don't see that being modeled as claims.
I disagree with this is not very useful. Tetlock built a career on it, but I agree that it's a totally different thing than being able to speak about the truth of the claim. And yes, that's precisely the distinction I'm addressing when I'm saying confidence is not part of the truth value, because I want to make that distinction.
Yeah, I was wondering if we can move that distinction to later and just accept that, a claim is an assertion that can be true-ish, and we will define what's in and outside true and the different terms in that area.
Where I agree totally with Stephen is saying whether this can be called true or false is what makes it a claim. Even if I say this is true 80% of the time, and that's distinct from saying this is true 100% of the time, saying this being true 0 or 100 or 80% of the time, the fact that I can ask that question is what makes it a claim. And there I'm with Stephen.
Okay.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's a good thing.
So do we need to rephrase and come to an agreement on the definition of claim now?
I think what the last thing Marc-Antoine suggested is actually a nice broadening of the one that I stated in truth false. I don't think that opposes that definition indeed. And then for me, essentially, it can stay similar. But maybe we should try to collaboratively write a new definition as we talk about it right now. I don't know how else to move this ahead.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, it should be short. We just have to.
So there are two main problems that I see. Yeah.
Stephen, so taking your definition and then considering the rewrite I suggested, do you see anything wrong with the rewrite I suggested? Because it seems to encapsulate, what you were interested in covering, however, resolving some of the issues that were brought up, such as the question.
Can you just add the concrete one? I don't see it. Which one did you suggest concretely?
Smallest assertion of truth can be fact or opinion. I think I left it as a comment on the bottom.
I wouldn't say
you define smallest.
Yeah, I wouldn't say smallest.
An individual unit. So this kind of resolves the issue of, do we consider an argument and a claim unto itself?
So that's
And-
the point. I wouldn't do that yet. And that's also why there's concrete concatenations of claims in the examples that do match the definition, because we do want incremental
Complex claims.
normalization where you can then later have one claim and break it up in multiple claims, for example.
Right. So we just remove the smallest word and just say assertion of truth.
Yeah, maybe we want a separate definition for atomic claims, and that may be a relevant thing to do, but
Not
claim is broader than atomic claims.
And then can be fact or opinion.
Yeah,
now.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. There were a couple of things we added. Yeah, the phrases one was added to, that was after discussion with Bentley, and that I think that's still relevant to discuss right now. I think I added it in one of the comments in this card. The current definition implies some type of curation of phrases associated to claims. How do we enforce the requirements?
Okay, one second. When you say assertion of truth, it's assertion of truth of what? It's of a situation, right? What I tried to do in my definitions, which we didn't even look at, is kind of make the links between the claim, the truthless abstraction of the claim, truth value-less abstraction of the claim, which is the posit, which I don't want to model, but I may still want to define it, and the claim family, which is all the claims that are related by having the same posit and different truth values.
Is it possible to define this by pointing to this assertion of truth that can be fact or opinion afterwards, or it needs to be an integral part of it right now?
I think definitions make more sense when they're a hold-on, that is when they refer to one another, but that's my attitude to truth. But more important is assertion of truth of something. It's assertion of truth.
It can be really about anything, I think. It can be
so too.
assertion of truth about a situation.
A situation,
entity,
already
a state of the
that's
world.
closer to what I have in mind of a
But-
situation.
Yeah, but of a situation, but also an entity, a condition.
How does an entity have truth? The situation is
that an entity is.
that's
entity
that's
is-
distinct from the entity definition. The entity definition doesn't have a truth. The entity existence has a truth value.
The entity existence has a truth value, or the condition of the
Which is
existence of the
distinct
entity.
which is
think so.
distinct from the entity definition, which does not have a truth value.
Right. I mean, people can argue about the definition.
Yes, they
Yeah.
can say that's a valid or invalid definition, but that's not the same as arguing about a truth value. Is it applicable to this situation? Is it
Yeah.
meaningful?
So I
Is
think
it-
this definition still covers it.
And I think even less covers it, because fact or opinion are basically examples, right? When you say it can be a fact
Are
or
basically
opinion,
examples. Yes. It's
So
just
we
to
can-
it's just to
they
allow
don't
for
have
the
to be
subject
part of, right, but they don't have to be part of the definition. They can be moved lower to the example section.
I think it's important because we've kind of tripped up on this before when we talk about like, well, what do we mean by truth? Do we mean subjective truth or facts? So I think that as an example, and sometimes definitions are written with this type of example, it's like a clarifying phrase at the end of it, assertion of truth, but we're not saying truth means fact. We're saying can be fact or opinion, can be subjective or objective. So I don't think we need to pare it down. I think it's still useful there.
Yeah, I agree with this
But
very
I-
short rewrite.
I still disagree that it's assertion of truth of anything. It's assertion of truth of a situation. And I would specifically exclude entity definitions.
But
entity existence is fine because
So
that's a situation.
the earth is flat, right? So
Yeah.
the earth is an entity.
Yes.
The earth is flat is an assertion of truth. It's not necessarily
Yeah,
a
but it's
situation,
about
an
it's about
entity.
a situation, the flatness of the earth. It's not about earth definition.
No, it is about earth definition.
No, it's not part of earth definition.
It's about the characteristic of the earth, which is not the situation of the earth. It's a statement about the entity that is earth.
Okay, let's get into this. It's about saying that a certain claim about the properties of the earth, you can say it's either a statement of empirical fact or part of the definition. I would say it's a statement of empirical fact. Because if we discovered that the earth is flat after all, we still feel we're talking about the same earth. Why? It may change our idea of what the earth is in certain ways, but we're still have the same underlying idea about this thing we stand on. This thing we stand on is part of the definition. If we're not speaking about this thing we stand on, we're not speaking about the Earth. But if we're speaking about empirically it's round or flat, well, or fractal shape, if we get into details of shape.
Marc-Antoine, I can see that you could be accurate, but I don't understand why that is important at this stage. What's the danger of leaving that unspecified?
Okay.
So more concretely, I would say give me one exception of an assertion of truth that doesn't fit this definition that is going to give us problems. Because we're not talking the abstract. We want to be very concrete, where you say, oh, but if this is the definition, assertion of truth, then this thing would fall within the example that matches the definition that I don't want it to match.
Okay. The idea of Earth is true. What?
Okay, a realistic example.
How is that not a realistic example? I just uttered it. It's real. How can it be more realistic than real?
Just because it's possible to be said doesn't mean that anyone will ever say it.
Okay.
What's something that's going to actually cause a problem in practical use?
So,
and early in the practical use that we can't solve this problem later. It's going to cause a problem in the next month of discussions.
No, but I didn't fully get it. The idea of Earth is true. Is that not a claim?
I'm saying it's not a claim.
I think it is. It's just like
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I think it's
I'm
meaningless.
also not fully certain what it means, but I mean, but
It's meaningless. Something meaningless is not a claim.
That's a better discussion to. That's a better discussion to have, and that comes down to what an assertion is, and it comes down to the comment I left behind. Like, it comes down more to like how the interaction with the system works. Do we consider everything a claim once it's been entered, where the intent is that it's a claim, or do we only consider the claim once we have actually, well, once it's part of the definition? If you see what I mean.
Yeah. Meaninglessness is perfectly is a concern, but in a way it's not what I'm saying. The idea of Earth is not meaningless, but assigning it a truth value is meaningless. Ideas are not.
But the idea of Earth is not a claim.
That's my point exactly. It's not a claim because I cannot say is it true or false.
But it's not an assertion of truth.
It's
when you
precisely
say
my
isolated,
point.
The idea of Earth,
yes,
quote unquote, that's not an assertion of truth.
That's exactly my point. It's not
So
a claim. And this is what I call an entity.
Hang on, and that would be for good reason. That would be for good reason, though.
Yes,
because then so it fits within this definition.
Exactly.
It's what I'm saying. It's assertion of truth of what, and I'm saying it's the assertion of truth of something, and I want to exclude something like the concept of Earth from something about which truth can be asserted. What I'm saying is, it's not. We're not speaking about. Now you're making circular reasoning up to a point. You're saying the idea of truth doesn't have a truth value, hence it's not a claim, hence it's not a problem. But I'm saying we're defining claims as assertion of truth. I'm saying it has to be the assertion of truth of something, and it's that something which I'm saying is a situation, but not an entity or not a concept.
I would be fine adding of a situation.
I'm not, because then we have to define what a situation is. I mean, for me, it's irrelevant. I truly still don't see it. So, but I would
still think just saying an assertion would be enough, and we're done. Give me an example here that's not an assertion that doesn't fit the definitions or the counter examples.
Yeah, they might be synonyms actually.
And back to the same thing I say all the time, in mathematics, it's well-defined. Statement is exactly what we're talking about, basically, and they have a proper definition.
What is that definition?
I put a link into the chat to Wikipedia. And it's, I read it, in logic, the term statement is variously understood to mean either A, a meaningful declarative sentence that is true or false, or B, the assertion that is made by a true or false declarative sentence.
So let's look at declarative sentence. Because that's the crux.
Which is nice because it would imply an exclusion of rhetorical devices, right? Meant to persuade or imply persuasion.
But the
Yep.
a bit circular. A declarative sentence, or declaration, the most common type, commonly makes a statement. Example, I have to go to work. And statement is left undefined, not even linked. Damn it. But it's opposed to interrogative, exclamatory, imperative.
Statement, the definition of statement here in logic does seem to match exactly what I would consider.
Yeah, I
our
think
definition.
I think it's fantastic, especially since they have examples of sentences that are not or do not make statements. Interesting. The
And
King
I'm
of
glad
France
it's
is
binary,
wise.
true or false as well. I'm okay with going with this one as well. And for me, by the way, this is statement as I use in Socrates always. I only call it a claim once a person actually makes that claim and says yes.
Question here though, guys. Either true or false. So this does not encapsulate opinions, because as you can see, examples of sentences that are not or do not make statements include the King of France is wise, broccoli tastes good, and Pegasus exists. So
So yeah, those examples don't match our.
yeah.
Well, we have to modify it to our.
So yeah, we can modify it. But otherwise, I would agree with this very much.
And
referring to declarative sentence, I think I'm not that well versed in linguistics, but I think it's the linguistic term for what we're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an assertion of truth. Declarative. It is saying like such a thing is so.
I think in the previous the sentence page, what was interesting was what it was contrasted with. There was declarative, interrogative, exclamatory, imperative.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not sure this is the whole list. Like for me, that's a real question. Are definitions declarative? Now, there can be declarative elements to a definition, but it's not the same as a definition.
But we're not talking about definitions. We're talking about types of sentences in linguistics.
Well, I'm saying a sentence is a type of, a definition is a type of sentence. Thank you very much. The question is it a statement? And I'm saying it's a distinct thing than a statement, because it's not about true or false. It's about agreeing on the definition.
Right. And so this is actually a really big topic, because we've talked about this before from the Society Library perspective. The Society Library prescribes a definition to a term, but at the same time, we also have debates about the appropriateness of a specific term. So we use like as nondescript a term as possible to describe an entity when the description of the entity is being contested. For example, climate change. There's certain definitions about what climate change is that describes the entity to a point, but does not cross the boundary into determining what is true about climate change, because what climate change is in terms of characteristics, like its level of severity and the speed at which it's happening and who's responsible for it, is under contestation. So I don't know if CDL will be doing the same, if it only explores the debate about definitions, or there will be definitions prescribed, but it's a rather large debate to have.
That's a huge point. I just want to be sure that I understand that this is the methodology of Society Library, and I'm perfectly fine with it as a methodology, but we have to not confuse the methodology with the underlying model, right? We want to be able to store more precise definitions and compare them and say, well, these are the conflicting definitions, even though for the purpose of this discussion, let's start with the nondescript as core, as a pragmatic strategy, and look at the debated definitions from the perspective of this basic core. But we do want to be able to model the various definitions and how they contrast with one another, what characteristics do they share or not share. And what I'm saying is this debate about definition is not a debate about fact. And I want to distinguish those two. And that's a big part of what I mean by saying entities are not part of claims. I mean, entity definitions and debates about definitions are not about claims. There is an underlying claim that definition is appropriate, but I want to make that very distinct from I'm proposing that definition for that term.
So we have, are people saying that they want both of these to be part, or are we saying we're going to choose A or B? Or do we want to make that choice later?
I think we're saying that doesn't match exactly what we want.
I know, but I thought that was a different tangent. I was hoping we could narrow it down to one or the two sentences.
Yeah, if we're talking about that thing you've highlighted, for me it's the first. And not the second.
See, and I think it's B. Who all wants to weigh in on that? Which that's the question: is it the intent of the assertion, or is it the exact phrase of the assertion that a claim is?
So,
and then I guess we get into progressive formalization, because initially it is the string, and then later on it is the intent, right?
Well, it's not the string. I agree, it's not the string. So I guess that means it's the intent. I guess I agree with your second one. Okay. You can change the string and the claim remains as long as it's the same assertion. Yes. So
does anyone disagree with that? Does anyone think that a claim needs to be the strings or just the intent?
I think we need terms for both, and that's where the introduction phrase came from before.
Yes.
I think we need to be able to refer to both.
Well,
and by saying that there's both means that this is one of them.
Well, the sentence itself is a truth literal. Now, not all, text literal. Now, not all text literals are text literals of statements. I agree with that.
We learned just now in this meeting that the sentence itself is called a declarative sentence. I would just use that one-to-one rather than calling phrases we have on the backlog right now. I think linguistics does a good job of describing what it is.
I completely agree. And then all I would request to add to this is that we also include the caveat that this can also be an opinion statement. So the assertion, an assertion that is made by a true or false declarative sentence, but can also include opinions, because in this specific this logical statement must be like proven or not proven. Opinions, as shown by the example, are not included. But for the purposes of the Society Library, and I'd imagine CD as well, people would argue about, the likelihood of truth of a specific opinion.
I do agree.
Or at least
About Pegasus.
What would be an example of such an opinion?
So like, the King of France is wise is an opinion. Or we ought to do something about climate change now. Or corporations are morally responsible to pay for climate change mitigation projects, things like that can't actually be proven, but people would argue for or against, moral responsibility, or whether something ought to happen, or things like that.
Is this okay, or do we need to put can be an opinion afterwards?
I would add can be an opinion. An assertion is like something ought to be true. And what we have to recognize is that in the world of dealing with complex social and political issues, it also needs to include opinions, because we talk about things like values and rights and moral responsibility, which are things that can't actually be proven. They're just the subjective values of a culture or group or individual.
Yeah.
And I really like here the declaration that something is the case, which harks back to situation. Okay, I think what is really important for me is to distinguish from definitions. The definition is not true or false, it's agreed upon or not agreed upon, which is different.
I agree with that intent, and I think most everyone does here. I think we kind of agree that if two people are arguing and have two different definitions for a word, they're actually arguing two different claims. Is that another way of saying it, Mark? Antoine?
There,
Until we disembowel.
He wants
Yes,
it to
I
be.
would
He
say-
wants it to be negotiated, and I don't want it to be negotiated.
Okay, but we do understand that's a different concept.
if they have different
Yeah.
definition, if they have, you're right, there are two different claims, and the argument is not the argument about the truth or falsehood of either of the claims, but it is about aligning on what
yeah.
the claims mean.
Well, or they're just having two different arguments, and they think
You
they're
don't
having
need
the
to
same
align. I think in the CD you don't need to align. You don't need to align in the
Well,
CD. That's
oh well,
no,
you don't need to align
That's-
because we
That's your
explicitly
methodology,
separate them.
fine.
Right.
But,
no,
but
you,
either
you,
way, it's-
you have both debates. You go on both. You
Yeah,
don't need
that-
to
that-
waste
that-
time aligning.
that is okay. That is fine. There, I agree with you. You don't need to choose a definition, but you need to have both debates with awareness of the definition, of the underlying definitions.
So
Okay,
what?
that's
How
fair.
would you
I
like to
agree with that.
phrase that? But you're saying that distinction is important to make at this point in the discussion.
Yep. I'm saying
Definite. Do we want to just say definitions are excluded, and we can expound on that later, or does anyone?
well, we have
really object to
counter
that?
examples as part of the Trello, right? We can say.
I don't think that you exclude definitions from here because
Okay.
because you're using two different meanings of the word definition. And here we go. Let's debate about the definition of definition and
That's good.
debating
Let's do
about
it.
definitions.
Finally.
But given the climate change example, for example, right? You're going to say, mankind is responsible for climate change, right? And then you have to define climate change. And there's the whole section on what is climate change. And that's a debate, right? That you're debating about a definition, but that's a debate. You've made a claim, you make a claim that, climate change is this, and go ahead and debate that. That's fine. You have that debate, but you're not using that debate as a definition in the claim, in some other claim. When you say that like humans are responsible for climate change because they release all the CO2, and your definition of climate change is natural changes in climate that humans are not responsible for. You've just defined that debate out of the debate, right? Go ahead, but you're going to have that debate with multiple definitions. So I see when you're debating a definition, it's a claim. It's not a definition in the defense in the meaning I'd like to define.
But here's something. As like a real world example, right? So for climate change, you can describe what the concept of climate change is and exclude the characteristics that are under contestation. So climate change is changes in the climate system, right? Now, whether someone believes that changes in the climate system is a hoax, or changes in the climate system are happening soon, or changes in the climate system are going to be catastrophic to humanity, those characteristics of the definition of what we mean when we say climate change is a part of the debate about what climate change is, because that's one of our questions. And then,
but I would honestly, like, I've thought about this, and
So I
to me, this goes into the general to specific. In fact, what you have is a hierarchy of definitions of climate change, where you have one definition, which you could say is the umbrella definition of it excludes these things under contestation. And you can have a debate that unifies essentially all the characteristics that match under that umbrella term. Then you can go and debate this specific, if we define it as this, but so you have a relationship essentially between different definitions of global of climate change.
Okay, and let me go further. Sorry, when I say definition is not a claim, it is true that often a definition will be made of claims. It's this thing for which this is true, for which that is true, for which this is true, for which that is true. And of those claims that make up the definition, some are essential and some are empirical. And what I mean, and again, there may be disagreement about which are essential, which are empirical, but what I mean is at a very fundamental level, I'm saying climate change is A, B, C, D, E claims apply to climate change. And for some of those claims, they're what I call definitional, which means that if this is not true, I have another name for it. If it's like...
So the flat Earth, we're debating the flat Earth. right? The flat Earth
Yeah,
has edges, right?
Yeah, exactly. The flat Earth, for me, the flat Earth is an empirical part of the definition. Like I could be shown wrong about, well, let's go with round Earth. I could be shown wrong about the round Earth, and I was shown wrong because it's actually a flattened spheroid, right? Whereas if I make it, it won't change my idea of what I'm standing on. We're still speaking about the Earth. If you show me that I was wrong about, I thought it was a perfect sphere, it isn't, okay, but we're still speaking about the same Earth, and we know we're still speaking about the same Earth. I had to change my idea of what the Earth, characteristics of the Earth, but not about the topic of conversation. Whereas if this distinction between climate change is if you make natural, non-human caused as part of the definition, we have a disagreement on the definitional characteristics. But I'm saying, no, I would say that is an empirical characteristic. It does not belong in the definitional part, and we can have that conversation, because even if it were, whether it's true or not that climate change is anthropogenic, we're still speaking about that huge variation in average temperature, aren't we? And if we aren't, well, okay, so what do you want to call this thing, which is just the change, whether it's anthropogenic or not? And I'll ask you to give a name to it so we can talk about it. And I want to make that distinction between, if this is not true, let's give another name to it, versus if this is not true, I have to change my mind about this thing, but I'll still use the same name.
So, what, now we're going down a serious rabbit hole here. So I don't even know if I want to say this,
well, it's a
but
serious
let me say one thing I see about this related to debating about definitions and how you track them. And, let's say that you're having some debate where in the end, what your end goal is to figure something out, and that the end result hinges on whether or not the Earth is spherical or it's a flattened spheroid, right? So you're going along agreeing with all sorts of arguments and claims that are being made related to that until you hit a point where in the argument, it's not agreeing. And you're like, why isn't that agreeing? And you go and look at the definition, you see it doesn't quite match your definition of the Earth. So you fork it and you create your spheroid, perfect sphere version definition of Earth, and you have the same debate, and you see now this assertion is true. What you've got is what in the end, what floats to the top is you see the conditions under which certain things are true and not, and the one that most kind of matches reality or consensus opinion or your opinion is what's going to come out on top as true. And in that way you debate definitions and what definitions are important or good, is it most matches reality according to these definitions.
What I'm saying is, when we're having a debate about the Earth, and I'm not sure I disagree with you because I'm not sure I understood exactly what point you were making, but let me try to take it from my angle. When we're having the debate about how flattened is the Earth, we have an intent that we're speaking about the same Earth we're speaking of, and that is not under question. And this is what I mean by the entity up to a point. We are arguing about empirical characteristics of that topic, but we're not disputing the topic, what we're talking about. And if you find that we are disputing the topic, such as the climate change example, is, oh no, by climate change, I meant only the non-anthropogenic part of climate change. It's like, okay, but I'm interested in talking about climate change, whether it's anthropogenic or not. It's not the same thing. If you exclude it in the definition, we're not speaking about the same topic.
Okay.
But,
all I'm saying
yeah.
is that the Society Library has a real world example of this, right? Like we give a definition for what climate change is that excludes all of the things that people are arguing about whether or not it's true. I don't know how CD will solve this problem in its infrastructure. But there is at least one solution, which is the definition that describes an entity to the point at which it reaches controversy. So for climate change, it's whether or not it's anthropogenic, whether or not it's happening soon, whether or not it's going to be devastating, or whether or not it's real, right? So all of those are characteristics that are being debated. So all of those like conversations happen in the debate about what climate change is, even though there needs to be a definition for climate change, which is the definition of climate change minus those controversies, because those controversies are what need to be debated by presenting evidence, which will eventually go into arguing for one version of the definition once we combine those things is true or not true.
Makes perfect sense. Exclude the controversies from the definition.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
Mark-
Intent. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, do we have a proposed phrasing? Because I have lost track of the thread. I mean, I agree with what y'all said. I don't know how to take that back to the definition. But go
So
ahead, Shane.
we're talking about a definition of a definition, right?
Well, we're
Skipped
talking
over
about
to
the definition.
of a definition.
Well, yeah, right. So
Yeah.
I'm saying, what wording do we want to add to claim to disambiguate it from arguing about the definition as opposed to the assertion? Maybe.
Right. Okay.
We could just say is not a definition and then define definition as a statement of the meaning of a word, phrase, or term that is not under contestation.
So a quick comment here, rather than editing mine, just add new ones. I prefer to keep track of the history. We can always archive them later. I actually just added 2 new claim definitions as meeting, but whoever adds new ones, just add new ones.
So did you say you already added another claim and I should be doing those edits there rather than
keep
on
this
yours?
open for a second so I can write this. Assertion that is made by a true or false declarative sentence.
Yeah, it could say it can be an opinion and should not be considered a definition.
Should not be-
Distinct from definition.
Okay, and is distinct from definition. And then we can define definition.
I'm happy with that.
Cool.
But by the way, Jamie, just one thing. I would have separate definitions for the definitions in general and definitions excluding controversial claims. For me, like core definition would be the definition excluding controversial claims, but I don't want to make it impossible to express definitions that do include them. They're definitions also. We may call them improper definitions for all I care, but I need to have that as a named concept.
I think they would actually be claims.
I would say an improper definition is a definition that includes contested claims. I'm saying a definition probably always includes definitional claims, and an improper definition is a definition that includes contested claims as definitional.
But by the very nature of it asserting itself as true, would that not be a claim?
Say that again.
Would it not, by asserting itself as being the true definition, be a claim?
Yes, there is an underlying claim that this is a proper definition. Yes.
So I think we just need the core definition, right? Non-controversial definition describing an entity to an extent that
No,
does
hard disagree on that.
claims.
Hard disagree on that. I think I would define definition. It's a way to identify an entity, and I would even go as far as saying using claims, and then say core definition. It's a definition that only uses non-controversial claims, and in proper definition, it's including.
I don't see that definition working out, because how does the flat Earth fit as a definition then?
The flat Earth, well, it depends if you consider flat Earth controversial. If you
I would say that the Earth is flat is a topic under discussion, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
very controversial.
Yes. Okay. So let's take it as controversial. In which case, I would say a definition of Earth that includes the Earth is not flat claim is not a core definition. It's a definition, but it's not a core definition.
So I think that for me, I'm not understanding what you're saying. So let me try and apply it to the Earth is flat, right? So the the earth is flat is a claim. We would need
Yes.
the definition for flat and the definition for earth.
Yes.
And a core definition, a non-controversial definition, which to me I think should be definition, is the earth. So some definition that describes the earth, which does not imply whether it is spherical or flat.
Yeah, that's a core definition.
Any other definition that says the earth is flat, to me, is a claim. It's not a definition, it's a claim. Now it is a claim that's arguing about the proper definition of earth as having this characteristic, but the statement itself is a claim to me.
Okay, any definition, whether proper or improper, has an underlying claim that this is an appropriate definition. So for me, it's having an underlying claim is not the distinguishing characteristic of improper. I agree. For me, definitions include claims. And so the question of proper or improper is, does it include controversial claims? And I would not equate, the way I think you're doing, the improper definition, which includes the earth is flat claim, with the claim itself. The question is that claim definitional or empirical? And putting the claim into the definition makes the definition an improper definition, but it's still a definition.
Okay, I'm fine with distinguishing between two different types of definition.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think of an example, but it seems to me the fact that like the definition of definition requires.
Is there any way we can delay that concept until we get to definition of definition? Because right now we're on definition of claim, and I think we've disambiguated enough. Point of order.
Also,
Okay.
I just want to say Society Library has a glossary to present if we want to get to that at some point. Not today because we're at time, but
I think the Society Library glossary should be in the Trello, should be added to the Trello.
happy to do so.
Thank you.
Well, we made some progress.
I think we did actually.
Claim something that's finished to what we can agree on or not, like voting?
Well, that's a good question. That's why I added this one, and I see several problems with it, to be honest. An assertion is made by true or false. Does true or false even matter at this point? I mean, it is quite circular, isn't it? Just saying that a claim is an assertion. I do like the conclusion of the declarative sentence. So if we can, at the very least, have some consensus on that, that would be cool. But
yeah, I would have
I'm
truth
still
value instead
wondering,
of true or false.
I still think the main question is the relation between declarative sentences and a claim, and that's not specified here.
Okay.
I think an assertion actually kind of means declarative sentence, to be honest. It is not the linguistic term, but an assertion implies a declarative sentence. So I think if this is a little bit redundant.
Then it is redundant, but there has been this discussion where we need a glossary item for a claim which captures multiple declarative sentences. Like you can make the same claim using different declarative sentences, and we need a definition of that thing.
Yeah, I did not get into that.
Okay.
We said declarative sentence was going to replace text literal. For me, it's a special case of text literal. I don't think it's worth a subclass, by the way, but it's a text literal which happens to be a declarative sentence. But there are text literals which will be definitions or simply naming an entity, like Earth is a text literal. It's not a declarative sentence. So for me, text literal is much more generic, but I accept declarative sentence as a special case of it.
Yeah, but that's the case we need to discuss claims, obviously. So we don't at this point need to discuss Earth, that's further we will. And that's probably an entity or whatever, but we don't need to have a discussion right now.
Yep. But for me, I had put in my definition of claim the fact that the assertion is in a many-to-many relationship with text literals, or now we could say with declarative sentences.
Exactly. So what I propose concretely to have some concrete consensus is that we try to see whether everyone agrees with the linguistic definition of declarative sentence. So we can at least reach consensus on that one. So we can archive all the phrase, text literal, all the ones that seem to encompass the same thing. And then everyone writes their own very concise definition of claim, which is a thing that can be expressed using multiple declarative sentences or an alternate definition, which we can then look at on Trello rather than just having so many ideas at the same time in one meeting.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Should we have a, I work great with deadlines. Should we have a deadline in which this should be updated so that we have enough time to review? Like, let's say by, you know, Thursday, everyone should have taken a look at this and updated it. Does that work with everyone's schedules?
And by Thursday, you mean end of day Wednesday?
Yes.
Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern.
Okay. It could be end of day Thursday too. That gives us enough time to look it over, have
Before the
discussions,
meeting.
and be prepared for the next meeting.
Well, a few hours before the meeting, minimum. I would say.
I don't think that's enough time. Like, if
I don't think it's enough time either. I said minimum. That's why I was happier with early Thursday as opposed to late Thursday. I'm not happy about meeting that deadline, but
Well, we could just say 9 a.m. Eastern Thursday. Just
all right. It's going in my calendar, guys. Oh, snap. That means it's going to get done.
Like, to do what exactly? Like, everybody should write down their own definition again, or what? No.
Or agree with the ones that I already added, or add your own, I would say, yeah. So either you agree with one that's already added. So Felix, you already did your work. If you
Yeah,
still
I
think
guess
that's the
I
best
just
description,
removed mine.
or update it to point to the declarative sentence, ideally, if that's the one we're using.
Okay.
I will do the same, and then we can just see where we stand at that point.
are we doing only, so we're doing claim and declarative sentence. Are we doing anything else? Are we getting into definitions?
I think it's good. It's good to have something finished.
Yeah, I'm going to add the whole Society Library glossary, though, if that's still desirable.
I think you
Yeah,
should.
I think that's a very good idea.
I think you should.
Where to add it though? Let's add an extra column, resources.
well, I think she was going to add each individual one as a card, right? And for discussion or not?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. So some of them, you know, have disambiguations. So like, you know, claim, there's different types of claim, but the different types of claim relate to the Society Library process in particular, which doesn't necessarily apply to CDL, but I guess will be important in understanding the concept of claim from the SL perspective.
Yeah, it's the implicit and the implied stuff. The points where we're trying to be more minimal and not drag even more context into it, but I still think it's relevant to link to it again. So I would just add it as because it's a PDF, right? Just add it in the resources column.
Well, I have
Break it down.
the PDF was only about making claims and arguments. And so because we were kind of diving into more of like the whole data architecture, I've added stuff to it. So I have it on a doc now. So I can update the PDF and add those things, or I can just put it in the Trello and take the examples that were in the PDF and put that in Trello as well.
Yeah.
I think that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, because I've posted the
everything
PDF like a billion times. And I don't know if you guys have ever looked at it.
Yes, I have.
I think I did.
Thank you, Marc-Antoine.
I would say if when each of us does it, let's write "I've done it" so others can know that it's
That's
ready
a
to read.
great idea.
Where in the Hangouts?
Yeah, in the Hangouts.
I might. Okay. Are we done?
We're done.
Forever hold your peace. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to kick you out of the meeting. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.